The importance of revisiting what we learned is one of the few things everyone seems to agree on. We all tell students that they should review and revise what we do within our lessons, but how are we helping them in the best way we can? I'm Rubens Heredia, one of your Pavilion ELT vloggers, and in this series of videos, we look at different moments in our lessons, thinking about how to make them more effective, engaging, and fun. And in this video, I'll share with you 5 tips to refresh and revise learning. Do you want to know how? So come with me. Homework, vocabulary lists, revision slots, those are all tools that teachers use to ensure that students don't end up studying something in one lesson and never coming across it again. Some people even like to put a number to it and say that students need to use a new word 7 times in order to internalize it. Whether this is true or not, research seems to indicate that repeated opportunities to use new words and structures are an integral part of language learning. So let's cut to the chase. Tip number 1. Be systematic. Let's be honest, it's not uncommon for us to treat revision as an afterthought. We often wait until tests and exams are coming to actually get down to encouraging students to revisit everything they've learned throughout the term or course. Many of our efforts to foster revision involve going through long lists of vocabulary and cramming everything at the last minute. However, this is far from ideal, and research seems to show us that it's not necessarily the best course of action. According to Ellis and Ibrahim, we need to plan and integrate reviewing into lessons systematically and explicitly in order to develop a reflective learning environment. This involves establishing a climate of mutual respect in a collaborative, cooperative, and inclusive atmosphere which values diversity. One way you can do this is to set aside some lesson time to revisit the contents from previous lessons, like structures and vocabulary. It might revolve around checking homework, but don't stop there. Try to make sure students have an opportunity to personalize the language you're revising, that is, use the words or structures in a personal and meaningful context. Tip number 2, don't wait too long. Okay, we've already agreed that we shouldn't wait until the end of the course to review and revise, but when should we start doing it? According to research, the sooner the better. Listen to what Boleslav said in a Modern English Teaching article. A learner has to encounter and use a word many times before it sticks. The following has been proposed by Russell, 1979, in Gaines and Redmond, 1986. A review 5 minutes after class, a quick review 24 hours after class, a further review 1 week later, and another review 1 month later. Of course, the perfectly timed and systematic time frame that can be achieved in a controlled research environment isn't really achievable in everyday reality, but we can use it as a reference to plan revision and homework ahead of time and help students organize their time. If you're using an LMS like Google Classroom, for example, you can even schedule automatic homework reminders to students. Tip number 3, use technology for spaced repetition. Spaced repetition has been around for a long time, since the 19th century. The premise of spaced repetition is simple. It says that after we first see or learn a word, we tend to forget it in a predictable way. However, if we see or use that word again repeatedly, the need for repetition gradually decreases with time. In other words, in order to increase the chances of internalization of new words, we need to see or use the words again repeatedly, and less so as time goes by. Just like we've just seen in the previous tip. In more recent years, we've seen a boom of digital tools that can help us implement spaced repetition. Even language learning apps take that into consideration when designing their language courses. One of the simplest ways to do this is by using flashcards and websites like Quizlet. According to Kyortsidis and Chase, creating customized electronic flashcards greatly enhances language acquisition and makes the learning process more productive. Electronic flashcards can also include multimedia elements such as audio, images, and even animation. It might take a few attempts and some experimentation for you to feel confident using digital tools, but the learning curve tends to be quite quick, so don't get discouraged if you're not the most tech-savvy person. Give it a try. Tip number 4, help students form habits. We've been talking about how important repeated contact with the items we learn is. The problem is, new habits can be quite difficult to consolidate. Anyone who has picked up a new exercise routine or activity will be able to tell you that the initial weeks or even months are the hardest, but that once the new activity becomes a part of your routine, it is a lot easier to keep it up. The latest edition of Modern English Teacher has a very interesting article by Nick Micheliodakis in which he gives 9 tips to form good habits. The focus of his article is university studies, but this advice is really transferable to English language learners as well. This is one that strikes me as particularly interesting. Most of our habitual behavior is triggered by cues in our environment. What we need to do is help students identify such salient moments and triggers during their day and link their learning habits to them. Cues are very potent at triggering behaviors. They are key to automaticity. Make sure you check his article and see other great suggestions. Of course, consistency on the part of student kind of requires that we be consistent in our end as well. Setting up systematic revision work is also a good habit that we can develop. Tip number 5, encourage student autonomy. Nobody disputes that developing learning autonomy is a good thing and should be one of our goals. As a lot of review and revision works ends up being done by the students on their own at home, some level of learner independence is not only useful but essential. According to Hugh Deller, it's vitally important to revise regularly, preferably daily, in class. However, it is also important to get your students to revise in their own time. You can encourage this by giving them a series of helpful tips. Hugh goes on to give a number of tips to develop learner autonomy. You can even find a downloadable PDF on the Modern English Teacher website. I particularly like the suggestion of using a separate notebook to reorganize and categorize the things students learn in class, and the idea of having a study partner. I'm definitely going to start using them in my own language learning. I hope these tips help you provide support to your students in the complex process of internalizing the new language items. And we'd love to hear your ideas. What strategies do you use to foster revision and reviewing? Let us know in the comments below. You can also contact me on all social media at @ParisILT. Keep learning and keep teaching.